Hey, what's going on, everybody out there in the packaging universe? This is Adam Peak. You're listening to the People of Packaging podcast. And last week, I got to talk a little bit about the TLMI event. And I heard an economist there, and he was saying, Alan, which was great. And he said, hey, this is the time. The next couple years are really the time to start preparing your business if you're interested in selling. And so, what a better podcast to bring to you next than with three folks from Mesero, and we're going to talk about M&A strategies, what they specialize in packaging, and so they're going to be sharing. I've got three folks from Mesero on, Nitay and Melanie and Rick, and we're going to be talking all about M&A and investment activity. So stick around. This is going to be a great one.
Hey, good evening or good morning or good afternoon. I don't know if that, do you say good afternoon? Yeah, that's a word. Whatever time you're listening to this podcast, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day. It's considered TV, right? I'm guessing. We're live on the YouTube. Live on the YouTube. Not in Belarus, though. Told. For paper, you have to flatten it before you receive. I'm guessing they don't crush everything before they're collecting paper. Like 3D objects get routed away. If you leave your paper like a box, if you leave it assembled, the likelihood that it's going to be the back goes down.
Thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to listen to the people of packaging. Sometimes I listen to that, I'm like, I gotta shorten that. I mean, 43 seconds is not very long, but maybe for like podcast length it is. I will deploy my producer, who's also my 17-year-old child, to fix the length of that. Well, this is a full house, and I feel a little bit like Danny Tanner. Do you guys get that reference? Are you children of the 80s? No?
I am, yes. Do get the reference. It's a good one.
Thank you. DJ, the TV show Full House with Uncle Joey.
Oh, that's right.
Jesse. Yeah, Danny.
Anyway. I've already grown up by then.
That's fair. Well, like I said in the intro, I am joined here by Melanie. What? Hang on. I didn't even ask how to say your last name. How do I say your last name, Melanie?
Yermack.
Melanie Yermack. Rick.
Weil.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Nitay
Laor.
Okay. That's the first and only time I think I'll have to say your last names. Appreciate y'all for coming on here and talking about everyone's favorite subject, mergers and acquisitions. But it's time for us to have this conversation here in the podcast because there's been so much M&A activity in the packaging space since I got into it, honestly, 17 years ago, but it seems like it really picked up, especially pre-COVID. There seemed to be a lot of activity. And so what better than to have two experts and also Nitay. No, I'm just kidding. Before the show, we were talking. He was like, these guys have like 25 years of experience, so give them more airtime. But I'm super stoked to have you three on the show. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Rick and Melanie, you are both managing directors, and Nitay, you are a vice president or the vice president?
A vice president, that's right.
A vice president, perfect. Why don't we start with you, Melanie? Why don't you give us a little bit of an introduction about who you are and what made you do the crazy thing and get into packaging investment banking?
Yeah, no, that is a great question. So I'm Melanie Yermack. I'm a managing director. I co-head our packaging practice alongside my partner Rick here. I started my career at PricewaterhouseCoopers and joined Mesero 14 years ago. Pretty quickly fell in with Rick and a couple of our other partners. One packaging deal begot another and another. So it's been a great track record here at Mesero. And what I personally find really rewarding, the majority of our clients are entrepreneur-owned businesses. Find a lot of value in kind of walking them through a process, start to finish. It's been great. And as you mentioned, there's been so much activity in packaging, M&A, and we'll get into this a little bit later on in the podcast, I'm sure. But if you look back 10, 15 years, just the proliferation of private equity investors in packaging, and it's across substrates. So it's labels, folding cartons, flexible packaging, corrugated, packaging distribution, rigid packaging. It really runs the gamut in packaging, but there's been so much private equity interest and attention in the market, and COVID, I think, really shone a spotlight on how resilient the sector is. It's attracted a tremendous amount of capital. So we've had great outcomes for our clients because of that, in crafting really customized processes, putting, pitting buyers against each other to drive great outcomes here.
Yeah.
So
That's and the reason I'm excited about having the three of you on here is the conversation around, investment banking and private equity is very faceless. It's just like, private equity. It's like, but it's easy to be mad at something that is not a person, right? So, I love to, this is the people of packaging. So I love to talk about people and talk about their stories and really bring to light what people are doing and how our industry is impacting people's lives. Let's go. I was going to go to you, Rick, but you raised the glass and I didn't want to interrupt you. So we'll kick it over to Nitay. Tell me about your journey into this world.
Yeah, I actually was born and dreamt of brown bucks when I was 1 year old. So
you definitely did not, sir. That is a lie. I can.
No, I started my Nitay Laor. I'm a vice president with Mesero, so I work under Rick and Melanie in the packaging group. I started my career on the accounting side as well. I was doing that for about a year and a half before coming over to Mesero. I think what I found really interesting about packaging M&A in particular is first of all the tangibility of it, the ability to just see it everywhere you go, the use cases it has for really almost every industry you think about, which I'm sure a lot of people in the space can relate to. And I think I was just really impressed by the sheer level of experience that our team has and what they've been able to do. It's something that is just needed all across, right? No matter what time period you're in, recession, no recession, right? It's just it's always something that is growing and need people that are servicing the industry. So I found that to be fascinating, and I see it going forward.
And Rick, I guess kind of do an introduction of yourself, but also maybe answer the question like, what do you do? what do you actually do at Mesero? Is it investment banking? Is it M&A? Are you advisors? Like, so do the introduction, but then also like tee up what y'all are doing.
It's a great and fundamental question. So I'm Rick Weil. I've been at Mesero for 24 years, and I've been doing M&A M&A advisory the entire time, and I'll get into that. I was lucky enough to fall into the job in 2000, and I started working really on day one with who became the three of ours mentor. He passed away a couple of years ago, but he was the guy that really explained what investment banking was. I was in the accounting industry before, and early on I worked with him, and I didn't really understand what I was getting myself into. But when you are a M&A advisor for whether it's packaging or any industry, you are a salesperson, you're a financial analyst, you're a psychologist, you are a lot of things to your client. And in our case, most of the time, our clients are family companies. Sometimes our clients are private equity firms, but you have to have multiple skill sets to do your job for your client, and you have to have a big another set of skills to deal with the buyer community and be able to have a disciplined approach. So with them, it's a very active. As I say active, it's never a boring thing of what you're doing. You are advising a company, someone who's built a business or a family who's built a business and has grown it for generations, and is now the time to sell it. There's a lot that goes into it, and helping them prepare for the outside world to see their business is an effort in itself. So getting them prepared, helping them to really take a step outside their company, look at it from someone else's perspective and say, well, why do we exist? What are we really good at? What's the opportunity? How do we sell that opportunity? Why are we special? Why are we different? And then be able to take all of that information and then go into a process where you're talking to buyers. And as Melanie alluded to earlier, you want to make sure it's a regimented process organized, well prepared, well advised, where you're able to exact, multiple options for your client, whether it's selling to a private equity company or selling it to a strategic company, what the differences are, and then helping them realize that, taking them from here's the idea that we like, here's what we'd like to do, and then all the sausage making to get a deal done. And it is a very labor intensive process.
I can imagine. Melanie, in your 14 years, kind of going back to what Rick is saying about how you guys are helping companies have successful, whether it's, like, M&A or investment banking, whatever it is, what is a success for you? I would imagine it's not just the deal got done, but there has to be some other satisfaction to, yes, the deal got done. And also, let's say it's a family-owned business, and also, part of the legacy was able to carry on, or they created more jobs, or, like,
Yeah.
how do you guys define success there?
Yeah, that's a great question, Adam. And we spend a lot of time thinking about that internally, me and Rick and Nitay, and talking to our clients about that and understanding, valuation is one attribute, but a lot of our clients' legacy is important to them. I think there's a connotation that buyers come in and they're focused on cutting costs and improving margins that way. I think the reality, what we found, is that the vast majority of buyers want to invest in businesses. They want to continue to grow it. They want to build upon what the company has built and continue that legacy, invest on it, lend additional resources to make that business as successful as it can be. And so I think how we view success, it's not just valuation, which I think we do a great job of creating competitive processes and delivering the highest valuation to our clients, but finding the partner that's going to fit with them culturally, that's going to take care of their employees, that's going to invest for growth. So a lot of what we do is we bring options, as Rick said, we bring options to the table. We bring buyers with different backgrounds. We bring strategics, private equity. Everyone operates slightly differently. We bring all those options to the table so that our clients can make an informed decision, who is the best fit for them going forward.
Yeah. So how does that work if I'm, I'll make up a name. I'm ABC Packaging Company, and I'm the third generation. I'm looking. I don't think that there's a fourth generation that's going to take over the business, and so do I approach Mesero and say, I'd like to explore what it might look like to sell my business? Do you find me in this case because you're at Pack Expo and you're at the networking events? Do I, do I pay you to help me with that? Like, how does that whole thing work? I'll let, any one of you can take that. You can just raise your hand like we're in elementary school. Go ahead, Rick.
No, we do a lot of direct outbound marketing to people in the industry. We speak at industry events. We go to the trade shows, and we are on the road a lot, meeting with business owners. And the lead time on these things are very long. I mean, a couple cases of 10 years, where every year, you meet them and you talk to them and tell them what's going on in the market, and tell them about deals that you've done that were interesting and relevant to them, without hey, are you ready to sell? Hey, are you ready to sell? Because that's annoying. You want to be informative and helpful to them, and help them position their business for whenever that may be. It could be 5 years from now, or whenever that they actually go to sell. So we spend a lot of time up front talking with, meeting with, advising companies as to what it could look like down the road. And again, these lead times are long, and I'd say probably 60-70% of our time is spent doing that.
Okay. So are there people who come to you and you're like, it's probably not right now based on what we're seeing either in the market or we see in your financials, but let's stay in touch? I mean, do you have to? Okay.
Yes, all the time. Yeah. Because, hey, we just wanted to meet you and hear what you have to think about, with what you think about our company and the industry, and where do you see things going? We're not ready, and my son's coming into the business, so we're probably not going to sell for a while. That kind of stuff all the time.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, I'd add we're motivated to get the best outcome for our clients. We've built our reputation on representing entrepreneur owners in sale processes. It's not, a machine where one deal onto the next. We really do want to give our clients the best advice in a process. And if they've just invested a lot of money in capital equipment and there's a lot of new business coming online because of that, we might have a conversation. Hey, it's worth waiting a few months, prove out that you're getting the efficiencies and you're getting the new business on this equipment so we can capture the best value here. You know, obviously tariffs is a big topic right now. If companies have a lot of exposure either through their supply chain or their customers are importing or exporting a lot of product, you know, we're having that conversation with our clients in real time that, you know, we may need some clarity on tariffs before it's the right time to go to market. It's not, hey, you give us a call, let's rush it out there. We want to get great outcomes for our clients, and we make sure we take the time and lay the groundwork that our clients are best positioned for a great outcome.
Right. So
No doubt.
We always want to over deliver, right? We never want to be in a position where we're, giving them advice to rush because it benefits us somehow. We play a long game, and it's a big industry, but it's also a small industry. So we live and die on our reputation, and it's important to give the advice that is best at putting yourself in their shoes. So it's important to really put your best foot forward on their behalf and give the best advice.
I love that.
Yeah.
Nitay, being a little bit newer, I'd be curious, what are some things that you have learned? I forget, how long have you been there? Did you say? I can't remember. 7 years?
8 years. Yeah.
8 years. Sorry. I sold you 1 year short. But as you've been kind of growing and learning, I mean, obviously 8 years, you've seen a lot. What's maybe one or two things that you sort of wish people knew about what it is that you guys do? We'll say it's a family-owned business. Whether it's, I wish they knew that how much we value cash flow, or I don't know what it might be, but like, I'm sure there's just some advice that you would love to just give everybody, and certainly not everybody listens to this podcast, but let's pretend like they are.
Right. I think if there was one thing I could point to is, and you said it to start the podcast, but a lot of times people associate M&A or private equity as this process where let me sign a banker and move on and try to close as fast as possible. But Rick alluded to it, and a lot of times it's 8, 9, 10-year relationships. So even if someone is thinking about exiting their business or any type of estate planning going forward that is 5, 6, 7 years down the line, that is probably most of our relationships where we at least get to know the client early on and advise them. And it's a lot of times it's a multi-year process in terms of how you're thinking about selling your business, right? The management team that is in place, and where you're investing in equipment, et cetera. So I think what I would say is it's never too early to kind of have the conversation and get a better idea of where you are and what your plans are.
Yeah, I love that. In a book that I read early on in my business career was The E-Myth, and I don't know why this just sticks with me, but it was like, build your business so that it is repeatable, scalable, and sellable was kind of this mantra, right? Like, and people get scared about that. Like, oh, I have but I'm like, if you have a business that is sellable, that doesn't mean you have to sell it. It just means that you're doing good things. And if you have a business that is not sellable, you probably aren't going to be in business for very long, right? So I'd be curious, like, what are some drivers that might help some of these companies as maybe they're trying to prep their business for sale in the next, 2 to 7 years? And I'm not sure who would want to take this, but what are some common things that you're finding people are looking for today in the marketplace, knowing that we had COVID in 2020, we have a lot of uncertainty right now in the marketplace with, obviously, I think Melanie, you alluded to tariffs, like knowing that we can't predict the future, but what are some like core things that people are looking for that you expect will be going on in the future? Not sure who wants to take that question.
I'm happy. You want to take it, Melanie?
Go ahead, Rick.
Sure. Look, I think there's a couple of aspects. One, I think it's important that your clients know their numbers, know their financial performance, and understand what the drivers are. Why were margins up last year? Why were they down? Why were operating expenses up? It's really important to have a good eye on these things and to understand the trends, because at some point you're going to have to articulate those, But I think most importantly, it's important for these buyers to really take themselves, step back a little bit, and understand, like, what do they do really well? Who are they serving really well? Where do they compete well? And where should they stay away from, right? Really define their area of their market, or where they can do their best work, because that's a story that's easier to articulate than trying to be all things to all people, compete with the big companies, compete with small companies, do too much for everybody. That's a business that's confusing. And if you have a business where you're really well defined in those areas, that's sometimes it sounds easy to do, but it's sometimes really hard, and takes a lot of thought to articulate what we do well, and for who do we do it well for, and why do we do it well.
I love that. Melanie, do you have anything to add? Maybe even about like how would companies not just know the basics, but are there anything specifically that's really creating value right now in the marketplace, besides say EBITDA or, profit or cash? Like, are there things right now, are people looking for sustainability? Are they, what might be some differentiators today?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Sustainability is on the top of everybody's mind, and I think that's achieved in a lot of different ways. There's paper-based packaging, there's recycled and recyclable content in packaging, but I think, business owners that are at least thinking about it, thinking about their supply chains, how consumers and customers are going to feel about that. I think it's important to at least have some thoughts around it. I think, capital equipment is one, right? Where we get, is the business or the owners reinvesting in equipment and capacity and growth? And, a lot of businesses aren't. And we have a lot of clients where it's a lifestyle business, and they service their customers well, and they generate good cash flow, and that's great for them. So I think there's a pocket of buyers that value that. I think folks that really are proactive and think about the areas for growth and capital equipment, and what does this do for the business. And, oftentimes we have, nearly all of our clients, they're entrepreneur owners. They've taken the business to a certain point, and, it gets to the point where they need a partner to help accelerate that, whether it's a second location or meaningful CapEx, or there's customers they want to go after that they maybe don't have the bandwidth or the capacity to go after. So, I think having some thoughts about where the growth can come in the business, and I think it dovetails to Rick's point of, what do they do well? How do they service their customers? How can you expand that pool of customers that you're able to reach with, and what are the resources that you maybe need to get there?
Let me ask this about kind of a newer trend, and maybe we can talk a little bit about these trends. We hit on sustainability a little bit, but there's so much talk and noise around AI, Chat GPT, automation. I heard a great quote. There's a fantastic podcast. If you don't listen to it, I recommend it, called My First Million. And I heard a quote on that podcast by somebody who said that technology is the ultimate lever today, that you can really create a tremendous amount of value if you can leverage technology the right way. And to me, it seems like in the packaging industry, that is still a bit untapped, where some of the companies that I saw that are going through transactions, I was like, that sounds like it was a pretty high multiple. And it turned out that they had a really killer tech platform that the acquirer was like, we can't build that on our own. So are you seeing any of these trends? Like, has AI even really come into the fold? Am I just hearing things incorrectly, or what are maybe some other trends that we're seeing? Again, I can let Nitay, do you have thoughts on this? I'll go right over to you.
Yeah, for sure. I think that that is one of the reasons why people take a lot of interest in the packaging space. I think that as an industry, players have responded pretty well to that, and the ability to kind of play off both sides in terms of where you're advancing in technology and where you're focusing your time. And regarding your question to AI, I think that pretty much applies to everything when we say it's untapped, right? So there's a lot of opportunity to do more, and we see a lot of our clients spend more on automation and try to create efficiencies through automation. But definitely there's a lot of untapped potential across packaging in really most industries.
Yeah,
Agreed. Oh, go
I
ahead.
would add, I mean, certainly on the automation front, as Nitay mentioned, we're seeing clients more and more as labor becomes more challenging to find the right people for the right positions, investing in automation through their plants. So no doubt that's an important one. I think as companies think about e-commerce and how they approach the market, not just directly, but through e-commerce channels, certainly see AI having an impact there. But I think at the end of the day, what we hear from so many of our clients is it's a people-based business, right? Their customers are calling, their customers want their suppliers to be responsive and available and have capacity where the customer calls and they have a problem and the company can solve it for them and be reactionary, timely, um, get product out for their customer and be a real value added partner. And I don't know that I see that being displaced by AI. The fact that the purchaser, they purchased the wrong thing, they need to call their supplier and get product in a couple days or a couple weeks, and having a real partner to help them solve that problem.
Totally agree. And I'll give an example of where I think that's true. So at a previous company I'd worked at, I got a call from a customer, and we were printing flexible packaging, and it was digitally printed. And they said, "Hey, I got my order status, and it looks like we're missing an order. We're missing an item on the order." And I was like, "Oh my gosh!" And if you're familiar with lead times on flexible packaging, even digital, it can be weeks, and this order is supposed to ship in like 2 days. And so I was at the facility. So I said, "Hey, I'm trying to figure this out." And this particular facility had a tremendous software platform, custom built. It was awesome. And the CSR goes, "Oh yeah, no problem." And goes in, checks the stock, like does everything using software to enhance that exactly what you're talking about. I think it will always be a people business, but I do see a lot of opportunities for that to be like, yeah, it's not a problem. We'll get you taken care of, rather than give me a week so I can get back to you because I got to go check through all of our manually,
Right.
like our schedules that are all up on a whiteboard. There just seems to be a lot of those like process improvements, not to replace people, but actually to increase the value, I think, of people in that sort of B2B
Yeah.
highly relational business.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Rick, as we kind of wrap this up here, I guess I'm thinking about today, right? So today there is, I'm not an economist by any stretch of the imagination, but there just seems to be still a bit of either a whiplash from COVID or a lot of uncertainty, but that hasn't really slowed down, or certainly hasn't stopped M&A activity in the packaging space.
Right.
We just had the big one would be Veritiv purchasing Aurora. There's still a lot that's happening. So what do you think is maybe the outlook for this year? We've got tariffs, and we've got EPR laws, and we've got, there's a new presidency. There's all sorts of stuff happening in the US. So as you are prepping and looking out on these long-term relationships, you're talking about 7 to 10 years, what are maybe some outlooks that you are hoping that people can realize going forward?
Sure. Without going back too far into history, I would say, though, Melanie said in her introduction that packaging has really been very resilient, starting with COVID. Like the first 6 weeks of COVID, everyone was scared and didn't know what was going on. After that, packaging companies
Killed it.
Had great years. Great 20, great
absolutely.
21. And then 22, supply chain issues and inflation. There's still some M&A that took place then. And in 23, because all the customers stocked up and everything they could at the end of 22, there was destocking of inventory at some point in 23. So that was the year that you had to explain. And 22 was the year you had to explain with inflation and price or volume growth. 24, the way we look at 24 was, as much as you could have a normalized year, it was a normal year, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, there was an election, but I don't think elections have in the past impacted M&A one way or the other. No. So our thesis has been, and I think it's proving to be the case, and is that you can go to market with a normalized year where you don't have a heck of a lot to explain in the numbers from last year. You can maybe have a decent outlook on what's going to happen in 25. Obviously, there's no getting around. There's no doubt. No doubt. Uncertainty. surrounding tariffs and all, the daily flood of news, and it's on, it's off, it's on, it's off. I mean, that is definitely creating some tariffs, and it's creating some real impacts for packaging companies. If customers are all of a sudden worried about manufacturing overseas or in another country, they may make alternative plans. I mean, there's a lot that impacts business owners' lives. That said, I still think this will be a very, very busy year. There remains a huge amount of private equity who have generally been on the sidelines the last couple of years for the reasons we've said. So we think that there's a little bit of pent-up demand. Packaging companies are still performing really well. And those that are sort of navigating around tariffs or figuring it out or not affected, I think are going to be great targets for another good year.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you remember, there was a paper strike I think it was in Finland, and we almost ran out of kraft paper liner in the United States. So, when it comes to something like tariffs, I'm just quick to remind people, it's like even a label printer, we don't import a lot of printed labels into the U.S. For the most part. If you're going to make something in the U.S., you got to put a label on it. You're going to buy from one of the 2,000 plus label printers in the United States.
Right.
But tariffs still impact even something like label printing that is mostly domesticated because it's a global supply chain. And so, I think it's just important to know. And I love that there's companies out there like Mesero that people can go and just have that first conversation, right? Like, this is what I'm thinking about doing. Maybe I'm a little uncertain about whatever it is, tariffs or interest rates or you name it, right? They might have concerns, but I have to imagine if I were in that position, it would just be great to have sort of an impartial party like yourselves to just bounce these things off of. So I'm super glad that you're not only part of the packaging community, but you're able to come here on my podcast.
Thank you for having us, man. It's been great discussion. And that's the type of conversation we love having with because it's look, they've worked, their grandparents, their parents, they've worked their whole life. They grew up around the business, and it's such an important decision for them, and they need to be informed about it. And I mean, that's not a one or two conversation type of thing. It's a long education process.
Agreed. Well, Melanie, I let you start the show. I'm going to give you the last word here. How do people get in touch with you? They're listening to this. They're like, I got to talk to these people. What is the best way for them to reach out?
Yeah, feel free to check out our website, www.mesirow.com. We have an investment banking website. You can reach Rick and myself and Nitay through that. We'd be happy, as Rick said, to have a conversation with business owners. Always available. Always like to make time for folks.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Melanie. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Nitay. And I also want to say thank you. Please hold on to hear a word from the wonderful people who help make this podcast possible. Our lovely sponsors, Triac and SpecRite. Thank you all.
All right. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you.
Are you tired of managing your specs in spreadsheets, PDFs, or relying on suppliers to do it for you? Learn how SpecRite can help you digitize and take control of your product and packaging specifications to drive sustainability reporting, SKU rationalization, and better collaborate across departments and with your suppliers. Go to SpecRite.com to learn more.
Have you ever wondered, how do I reduce my carbon footprint? Should I focus on recycled content or reducing weight first? Which design strategies are the most effective for my products? Triac offers multiple solutions for lifecycle assessment, goals management, reporting, EPR fees, and more. Visit triac.com to connect with our team and register for a free 10-day trial of Eco Impact Compass to get started today.